So guys, welcome back to another My Hero What If. Smash like and hit subscribe and we'll get into the video. What if Deku had it was like a body stitching quirk kind of. I'll explain it a bit later when we come up to the points. But for now, we'll keep it simple. So, there are going to be some few changes because I'm experimenting with some what ifs. I'm probably going to make it nothing like the real storyline. So I'm going to change some stuff up. For one, Inko and Hisashi are going to be around. Hisashi will have a different quirk, and same with Inko. Hisashi will have a lightning controlling quirk, and Inko will have telekinesis because it's the most like a quirk. Now, Inko's number 3 hero, Hisashi's number 5th hero. And there's a lot of weight, and they're very harsh on their kids. So let's start it off. Inko Midoriya is in the hospital giving birth. She gets given her child's son. She names Izuku, and she's all settled down when the doctor says there's another one coming. And Inko is powdered in the face, her green hair flowing down to her face. She looks flustered and tired and ready to give up, but she tells herself in her head that she is a hero. She can take more children. She's fought way worse. She's fought the infamous All for One, and she's been on many missions with her husband Hisashi. And Inko's hero name will probably be like Telekai or something weird, or some really weird name, because I reckon Inko will call herself something weird. So the doctor takes baby Izuku, and then a baby girl comes out, and she names her Ima. And she's relaxed again until the doctor says another one's coming, and Inko basically looks like she's about to die in the hospital bed because she's going to have to give birth to another child. And so she does, and it's a baby boy, and the doctor hands him to Inko. It's Sora. Now, Izuku, Uma and its Sora would be placed in the hospital bed. They'd be whining, they'd be all red, they'd have superhero, so in their superhero blanket, and it's like a superhero blanket or something, cause yeah. And so Izuku, Uma and its Sora would be led outside where the press would be trying to interview them and find out their children, as Inko would telekinetically push them back, as Hisashi would take out their cameras because they didn't really want to disrupt the sleeping babies with his electronic power. Hisashi's power will be like Kaminari. Well, basically, his power is he can he can create an infinite amount of electricity and then shoot it. So yeah, but it's not like a shock shot like Kaminari's. He can compress it to make electrical lasers, fast and sound and speedy, and they go boom, stuff like that, and they're fast and they're really powerful. It's kind of like if you've seen a certain magical index or a certain magical railgun. It's kind of like Mikoto's railgun, something like that. And if you haven't watched it, then go watch it. It's good. So they would get to their house, as Inko would decide that she didn't want them to be rich, privileged kids like most superhero kids. She wanted them to be tough and learn how hard it is to get to the top, so they will eventually pass All Might. So she put all of them into the same class Izuku is. Now, Izuku would be more of like himself, while Itsuru would be kind of like a cross between with Aizawa and Izuku. But yeah, he would be like Izuku with like Aizawa's attitude and kind of his hair just messy and down, like straight down, not like messy up like Izuku's. And then Ima would be more of the outgoing type out of all three of them, and she was probably the most beloved in their class, but she didn't really like Bakugo much. And Bakugo, he kind of like how Mirio and Sun Eater, how became friends. Same with like Itsura and Bakugo. Like Itsura would be sleeping or just chilling out, while Bakugo would come up to him, yell at him, and play with him. Kind of that kind of way with Mirio and Sun Eater in kind of way. Yeah. Now came the day when they turned 3. Izuku and Itsura were playing with Bakugo while Ima was like playing on the swings with all her friends. As Itsura and Izuku were playing with Bakugo, the grass started, all the lights went out and the grass started to lift into the air as everybody didn't know what was happening. And obviously the teachers thought it was either an electronic kind of power or a telekinesis kind of power. And the only 2 people and the only 3 people with parents that have that power were triplets, Itsura, Ima, and Izuku. Now, the school would call their parents and say that one of them or 2 of them or all of them had their quirk happen. So they were taken to the quirk doctor. Now, same quirk doctor. Oh, I haven't described how Ima looks. Okay, basically just imagine a younger version of Momo, cross between with Deku. While they were at the quirk doctor, they took results on all of them and tested for anything, and they were all happy and trying to find out what their quirk was and what it was called. So they were there and thinking that they had unlocked all 3 of them had gotten their quirks and wanting to see how powerful they'd be, how hard it would be to become a hero, as Inko was waiting attentively because Hisashi and Inko had made a deal. When one of them had gotten their quirk, then they would start training them. And Inko wanted to start training them when they were 2 because she was that kind of type. Like Hisashi was a laid-back dad, and then Inko was trying to make them and being hard on them in a good way because she didn't want to like ruin their name or anything like that. So, and she wanted them to live up to their expectations and more. So, but Hisashi had made it till they got their first quirk, and when they were 3, because Hisashi didn't think they'd get their quirks till around 4 or 5, because both of them were like late bloomers. They got their quirks late, and 5 was acceptable to start minimum training, but he didn't think that they were going to start getting their quirks at 3. So so while they were sitting down here and Inko was arguing, until they made a deal that if all of them got their quirks, that they could start doing light training. Now, Inko wasn't happy about this, but at least they were training. So, I'm not going to do Hisashi because he hasn't been shown the comics. I mean, not comics, anime. And you can picture him for yourself, however you want to pick Hisashi. So they were Itsura, Ima, and Izuku waiting for their test results, and the doctor walked in. Miss Midoriya and Mr. Midoriya, all of your 3 all of your 3 children have quirks. As Inko's face was like uplifting, thinking that she could train them early, until the doctor said, but only one of them has shown itself just yet. As her face would like go down, as Sashi was kind of hopeful that this would happen and didn't want to work on them too hard so that their life would just be hero work and hero work. He wanted them to have fun, like a good dad. Now, he said that Ima and Izuku hadn't have gotten their quirks yet, and they'll probably get it in the next year or so. So, he said that their son, Itsura, had gotten a telekinesis quirk, as Inko was thinking that this was her expert specialties and she would teach, because they also made a deal that whose ever quirk was the closest resemblance, like out of them, they would teach them personally to like get a better grip of it. As the doctor said, however, he has some downsides, but gives some upsides as well. He doesn't have enough energy to physically get the telekinetic power that he needs just yet. So his body has adapted to a new way, which would be permanent for his quirk now, which he takes electricity around him and the energy of the electricity and puts it into his body. This means he'll have basically a very strong telekinesis, very, very strong. But also because of his very strong telekinetic powers and also the charge of energy, he'll also have enhanced senses, enhanced speed, and enhanced strength. It's not going to be like All Might level of strength or muscular level of strength. It'll just be like better than the normal human. And also he'll have a bit more intelligence as well. And yeah, so Inko wouldn't really think of it as, because she is more optimistic. Both of them are more optimistic. So they wouldn't have really thought it was a downside. They thought it was an upside. Because if they're versing somebody who used a lot of energy or used electricity, he would obviously beat them. Or if somebody wasn't that athletic or good, he could beat them with short range. Or if they were very good at fighting, he could beat them with long range. He was basically a powerhouse with going against anybody. He had moves to take out anybody. He was also very intelligent, so he was able to use his power more wisely. Itsura was obviously the golden child for the first year. But he didn't really care, and he didn't really want to become a hero. But his parents kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him for like the year to become a hero and training him with his quirk. And Ima and Izuku wanted to also train their quirk. Wanted to train with him. But their parents said it wouldn't. Well, Inko won the argument over Hisashi of whether they can train or not, because it would be too dangerous for them, in a way. So Hisashi caved in eventually, and they started training Itsura. Now, Itsura would tell the class about his awesome quirk, and he and Bakugo would become closer friends, as Bakugo would say that Itsura would be his rival. Now Itsura would always be like sleeping, and then Bakugo would come up to Itsura and start shouting at him and yelling at him to fight me. And Itsura would do it like occasionally, and he'd always beat Bakugo until he was bleeding, because Bakugo was just relentless and wouldn't give up. But the tables turned when Bakugo got his quirk. Explosions. As Bakugo showed off his awesome quirk. But because of Itsura's OP as hell quirk that he has, it was pretty hard for him to still beat him. He didn't really have the pride and higher authority he thinks he has, because Itsoro was there to knock him down the peg, and so he would stick by Itsoro to try and prove he was the best, and they kind of formed a close relationship over most of their years. But let's get back to Oma and Izuku. Now, Oma would get her quirk second. Now, one day, Oma would be playing on the swing with her friends, and while Itsuro was sleeping, she would see Bakugo bullying a kid. She would go up to Bakugo and say, "You can't do that, you can't bully people," as Bakugo would say. "This is a quirkless idiot. She shouldn't even exist," as he would send explosions firing. Now, Itsuro just wouldn't care, wouldn't mind, and would be sleeping on the bench, as Ima would try to tell him to stop Bakugo, as he just was like, do it yourself, and just rolled over and stopped talking to her, because his power required a lot of energy, and it was hard for him to do stuff. And when they were going to school, he was like the one that they always had to lug about, and Izuku was like middle, like he was thinking. Ima was, and Itsuro was at the back stumbling, and Ima was like the one at the front running around shouting for them to hurry up and stuff like that. Yeah, well, but then then every light went out just as before, and electricity zapped into her as she shot out to electrical bolts and when they came out, they were like shaped as electrical hands, as they swiped at Bakugo, burning him and also hurting him, as Bakugo would scream, "You're gonna die for this, idiot," as he would run at her, as she would expel a large electronic shockwave, which would burn Bakugo more, as Itsuro would finally get up and take all of her electricity into his body, and then just run away with Bakugo, and then he would sit back down and sleep. Now, Ima was very happy with her new quirk, and she was running about the house. Just imagine the Flash, but not running fast, just like a kid running around circles around the house over and over again. Yeah, she was very happy. So they went to the quirk doctor. Same thing for Izuku, but this time for Ima, they said that she had the quirk battery. So it's basically she can control electricity, and she can also keep electricity inside of her, which she can then expel and control as well. It's kind of like Black Lightning's quirk, if you haven't watched Black Lightning. It's basically his power. And she was happy, and she could do lots of things with this. And she was also pretty OP, and Bakugo would resent her even more, while he would try and battle her as well, and Itsuro would just stop him, because he didn't really want to see his sister get hurt, even though he didn't really care about most things. And then he would go back to sleeping. And this would go on for about 6 months. Izuku hadn't have got his quirk yet, until the day finally came where Bakugo and Itsuro were excluding Izuku from playing in the lake or something like that. They're excluding him for it, and he said, "Hey guys, wait up for me." And instantly he was right in front of them. Now everybody was taken aback, as they thought he had a teleportation quirk. So they took him to the doctor, and they did some checkups, and the doctor said he didn't have a teleportation quirk. They called his quirk Stitch. Now, let me go into some details about his ability. Izuku can break down his atoms and take them apart from his body, and molecules and other scientific terms for what your body's made up of. And he can shoot them at light speeds and also morph them around his body. So he could morph his hands into like a blade, or he could take his atoms and molecules and what other scientific term apart and send them at light speeds to teleport, or like have one arm in one direction, another arm in one direction, kind of like, the lizard girl's quirk, where she can take her body apart. He can also do that as well. But because of this quirk also, he's basically got regeneration. Like if somebody chopped his arm off, he could stitch his arm back onto his body and it would stay back in place. But then one downside is, you know how people with elastic quirks, like Luffy from One Piece and Elastigirl, how they have like infinite amounts of elastic power? He doesn't. So if he was going to change his arm into like, if he wanted to make his arm go long, he would end up running out, as it would keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Or if he wanted to create like a blade out of the side of his elbow, he would have to take up like all of his toes on his foot or something so that it would happen. It still is a pretty overpowered power. And if he like morphed his body in some way, in 10 minutes, they would instantly go, after 10 minutes, they would instantly go back into his body. Like if he changed his legs to make it more like a kangaroo's legs so he can jump and run faster, after 10 minutes, his body would go back. Now, after hearing this explanation, his siblings thought he had a very overpowered quirk. But Zoro's was way more overpowered. Emma was feeling a bit left out with her not as overpowered like power. But it was kind of like they could each beat each other. You know how like in rock, paper, scissors, like one beats another and then loses to another. Izuku could beat Emma, or Emma could beat Zoro. Zoro could beat Izuku. All three of them were like stalemated together. And then there was Bakugo. Bakugo wasn't the most powerful in this. He was kind of humbled by all three of their immense powers and how well and efficient they used it. So when Izuku told them about his power, they were all amazed but kind of confused, because it is a confusing power, Stitch. So he showed them by turning both of his arms into blades and teleporting behind them and unattaching his arm and making it appear behind them. And then he asked for one of them to stab him with a fork just to cut off his finger. And so they did so. After like a lot of arguments, well, he cut off his finger. And then they waited for about 3 seconds, and they saw his finger sail back into the position it was before, and then all the gaps in his skin close up. As everybody was freaked out but amazed, they started moving that same finger again, as like nothing had happened. Everybody thought he was by far the strongest in their class. So they would start their training with Inko and Hisashi. Now, Inko would train Zoro as Hisashi would train Ema, and Izuku would just like go in between, because he hadn't because it was very rare, but some quirks, like at the start where people started getting quirks, sometimes that just comes back again, like how Eri got rewind. That's how he got his Stitch quirk, as the doctor explained to him that day. So he kind of went between his parents, as they didn't really have a way for him to train, like how Ema would train her electronic powers on trying to charge up a car or something, or take away a car and trying to shoot more efficiently. Well, it was kind of like Ema would try and take electricity from someplace and then charge the car up by shooting it, or picking the car up with her electric hand ability, or slicing bits of pieces of toast or burning stuff to a point where she got a piece of bread and just burnt it so that it became toast, because in their household, it's kind of funny where, like, Inko, she holds the toast up out at the air, while Hisashi kind of, like, heats it up with his lightning ability, and voila, cooking is done. So she can't. So that's what Ima's training regiment was. Well, Itsoro would, like, kind of, like, take the energy from the car and use it for telekinetic practices or running around fields and just becoming more stronger and getting more energy. And they didn't really know what Izuku should do, because his quirk was more about how creative he could get, because you know how Izuku was creative, he would keep thinking of ways he could morph his body, like, you know how Ben 10 turns into aliens, he could, like, morph his body into different types of, like, versions of himself. So he would just participate in their regular exercise each day, and when they went off to do their own things, he would try and create more ways to use his body. And Bakugo would come over sometimes, and him and Izuku would work on different regiments, and then they would Inko, Hisashi, and Itsora, Ima, and Izuku would fight sometimes after the end of training to see who was the strongest. Itsora would win if he was more motivated. He basically would, like, throw them to the ground, and then he would get tired and just sleep on the floor, as Inko would, because Inko, like, Itsora was Inko's favourite, and Ima was Hisashi's favourite, and then Izuku was just there as the most overpowered one, as Izuku would throw Itsora out of the ring by taking fat and other stuff in his body, like his nose, his mouth, sometimes his hair, and he would turn that into, like, muscle fibers and enhance his muscular strength. And he would throw Itsura out of the arena, and then he can obviously bypass Ima's electrical power, so he would teleport behind her and throw her out of the ring as well, as Izuku would be the second most powerful, but most powerful out of them because of his determination and stuff like that. So that would how it would normally go down in training sessions. But then Bakugo would come over, just like I said before, same training as Izuku, and then without Mitsugi's permission, because Inko could just say something and she was the pro hero, and court and law wouldn't give a damn, because she was the number 2 hero now, because Endeavor lost his spot to Inko. Like, it's going back and forth, but for the month that Bakugo comes over and has a fight, Inko's in front. And she's ready to take over Endeavor, because obviously she knows about what Endeavor does. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what Endeavor does in this universe, but nobody gives a shit. He's a pro hero. It's just the way of the heroes in the world. In My Hero. So that's what they do. And basically when Bakugo goes over, Itsura tries his hardest, because he wants to prove because he doesn't want Bakugo thinking he's better than Itsura. Because Itsura likes to know that people think of him. He's got more of a superiority complex due to the fact that, one, parents are very famous and very high in the ranking pro heroes, and also the fact that he has a very powerful quirk, and that he's the most powerful out of his very powerful siblings. So he tries his hardest, and obviously, no hate to Ima, but she's the weakest quirk out of the 4. She gets thrown out of the ring first. Now Itsura and Bakugo would kind of team up on Deku. Deku would try and take out Itsora first, but then he would get flung to the wall with his telekinetic power or punched or anything like that. As Izuku would then try to attack Bakugo. But because of Bakugo's, very good senses and reflexes, and then Izuku would be flown out of the arena as well, and then it would be Bakugo and Itsora, and Itsora would obviously win, him having the more powerful quirk. Now, they would do this until canon, when they were like 15 or 16, so they would all be at last period. Teacher goes, I know what all of you want to be. You want to be heroes. You want to take the hero course. I don't need to give you the papers. As he would throw the papers up in the air, everybody would show off their awesome quirks. Ima would shoot electric blasts. One accidentally zapping Itsora. Itsora would wake up. Everybody's desk would be flying in the air and then just stop and drop back to the ground as Itsora would go back to sleep. Izuku would have both his arms and his head flying in the air as Bakugo would shout, Don't lump me in with these pebbles, Teach. Only me and Itsora will become heroes. Or if you will become heroes, you're not even going to be good. You've all got shitty quirks. You're all pretty bad. None of you are ever going to come near. So don't even try, Pebbles. He sits back into his seat. The teacher says for Bakugo to be quiet. Bakugo doesn't have that high superiority anymore because of the other amazing quirks that the other three class has. He knows the most powerful student, Itsora, won't stop them. But obviously, Izuku and Ima will try to. Now, he says, and also 4 people have applied for UA. Bakugo, Katsuki, Izuku Midoriya, and Itsura Midoriya. Now, Bakugo, Katsuki, and Izuku Midoriya are the only ones trying out. Actually, well, it looks like our 2 young prodigies, Ima and Itsura Midoriya, have actually got recommendations by their parents. Now, Inko and Asashi were giving 2 recommendations. They both gave them to their children that they trained, and Izuku was just left out. But he didn't really mind, because he knew that he would definitely make it into UA anyway. And Bakugo was sneering at both Ima and Izuku, because he only liked Itsura and didn't really like the rest. But he knew he couldn't really be mean to them. Otherwise, 1, they had powerful quirks, they could whip his ass. 2, their parents had powerful quirks, they could whip his ass. And his mum and dad didn't have powerful quirks, so he wasn't really protected here. So basically, the class would end, and Izuku would grab onto Ima's shoulder as she would grab onto Izuku. As she would say, ready to go home, Izuku would say yes. Ima would wait for Izuku, as Itsura would put his hand on Izuku, saying, can I have a ride too? Izuku can take 3 people with him when he breaks parts from his atoms. And he says yes, and all 3 of them are about to go when Bakugo jumps on, and when his atoms get broken up with them as well. They don't really go far, and they stop at an underground passage place, where they hear a ding 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 as a massive splouch is sounded as the sludge villain appears. He shouts, I only need 1 meat body, as he sees the bewildered Itsura and jumps into his body. Now, all of them are ready to attack. Ima gets smashed into the ground. Bakugo gets punched in the face. And Izuku gets his get his atoms spread over the place and push down so he can't rebel. Then they would hear, "I am here," as All Might would appear from in the sewer-like hole thing. All Might would reel for a punch as he would get thrown 50 meters into 100 meters into the air. Everybody was bewildered at how powerful Sorrow, this sludge villain, was. Now, they were like thinking that they had lost until, well, Izuku can't really think. He can only give direct commands while in his atom split position and can't really see. Because the downsides to him is not being able to see when he's split up. As All Might would come flying down and hit the sky. And hit the ground, sorry. Everybody was bewildered, the sludge villain was. And so he was a bit distracted. And Itsora would try and push him out. You could see a bit of sludge coming out of his nose, his eyes, his mouth, his ears. And then, when he hit the ground, a massive boom sounded as the sludge instantly left Itsora's body. And in one fast motion, All Might picked up the sludge villain's remains. Not dead, knocked out. So he put him in the bottle, and Sora and Bakio started walking off as Aima wanted to ask All Might a question. She would latch onto All Might as Izuku would think that what she was doing was unsafe. So he wanted to see what was going to happen. As he jumped off, he stayed in bewilderment as Iima was still holding on, and he saw where they landed, so he teleported right next to All Might. Now there was a black cloud of smoke, and he shouted, "All Might, where are you?" A man that looked nothing like All Might shouted,